What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and today we're going to be talking about some numbers and some data sets that absolutely, to be honest with you, blow my mind. They are just incredible in terms of the sheer volume and in terms of what I consider to be the impact, not on the hobby today, but I think what's really cool about this video and kind of this video series that we do here is the impact on the hobby. Yes, it's meaningful today, but this really is going to reverberate far into the future. And by that, I mean, right now the supply and demand curve is way out of whack. Even though we're starting to see some single cards soften a little bit, we're starting to see even some sealed product come down in terms of pricing. Like the things we're going to be talking about today, which in full transparency is going to be PSA grading volume. We're going to look at the most graded cards. We're going to look at the most graded sets. We're going to look at the volume and how it's trended over time. And when you think about, let's say, sealed products, for example, we all know sealed product is opened every single year. As crazy as this is to think about, every year there are 1999 first edition base set booster boxes that are being ripped, and that population is ever decreasing. When we talk about the PSA grading cards and the volume, that is almost always increasing. Now, as the sets get older and as the cards get older, obviously the rate of growth continues to slow down. But when we think about that, as those boxes are opened, a lot of people are sending those products out to PSA to get graded. And when you see the volume that we're going to be talking about today, I've just got to give a little bit of a pause because I know what's happening right now isn't going to last forever. I promise you, the supply and demand curve is going to start to flatten out. There's going to be a certain percentage of people who are in the hobby today that are eventually going to leave. And when those people start leaving and we see some of these PSA populations that are in the 10, 15, 20, 30,000 in terms of PSA 10 pops, you have to wonder that when those people start to leave the hobby, what are those cards going to be worth in the long run? Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a huge long-term Pokemon bull. So the markets go up, the markets come down, and when they come down, they're going to represent some great buying opportunities because, again, no matter how long the period lasts, I do think over the next 20 years, Pokemon's going to be a fantastic long-term buy and hold investment. So even though we're going to talk about some crazy numbers today, it certainly isn't scaring me away. I'm totally into it, but we all just need to be, I don't know, self-aware enough to understand what's happening in the market right now. And videos like this, I think, give us the very best opportunity to keep our finger on the pulse of it and to help ground us into what the hobby's doing and what the long-term impacts might be. So with that being said, we're going to talk about some really cool information in this video. If you enjoy it, if you have fun, we put a ton of work into videos like this. Hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two small things go a very long way in helping my small channel out, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. So first thing we're going to talk about is the most graded cards at PSA last month. And this is always a very fun, usually a very diverse list of cards to look at. It kind of tells you what's hot in the hobby right now. But this month actually is really different. So when you look at what was graded at PSA the most last month, it was heavy with the promos. Absolutely wild. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the top 10 cards on here are all promo cards. And the other thing that's really interesting to call out is that, listen, a lot of these are Japanese promos. So we have seen this list really ebb and flow over time. Sometimes it's heavy Japanese, then for a very long time it was heavy English. Now it's starting to swing back into the Japanese space, which I think is very interesting. The other thing that I've called out multiple times, really ever since Prismatic Evolutions came out, is the fact that there have been 0 single Prismatic Evolution cards featured on this most graded cards list at PSA for the previous month. And in terms of that, for me, when I talked in the beginning, I went on this long, conversation about how, listen, huge grading volumes could impact the cards over the course of time. Think about how popular and how absolutely amazing Prismatic Evolutions is. And we haven't had a single card listed here as a most graded single card out of that set. I think that is very good. It tells me the pull rates are just as bad as we think they are. It tells me probably not a lot of that product is getting graded. So anyways, lots to love about Prismatic Evolutions. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're a long-term bull on that set, that is a very good thing to call out here. The other thing that was interesting to me is Pikachu has just been having an absolute run of things. If you look at this again, we're talking about 6 of the cards that are on here are Pikachu cards, which I think is very interesting. Now, again, Pikachu is obviously a fan favorite, so whenever they do promo cards, Pikachu has a very high, hit rate of being featured on those promo cards. So not a big surprise. Also in Japan, Pikachu is like the jam over there, so you see a lot of these cards are Japanese. Now, listen, last month we only had 3 English cards on the list. This month, we actually have 4 English cards, which I think is really, really cool. We're starting to see some really interesting things kind of take shape in the hobby. I don't think this is enough to say that this graded space is starting to kind of switch over from Japanese to English quite yet, but there are some very, very cool takeaways. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say here is I love this Charizard, okay? The Charizard from 151, I have talked about that ad nauseum on this channel. Whenever the price starts to dip, I get very excited. I talk about it here. When it was at the $200 price point, I thought it was great. Now that it's working its way back down to $250, I keep talking about it again. But remember, when I said in the beginning, thinking about the total volume of cards that are graded, look at the number to the right of that red box. There has been over 78,400 of those 151 Charizards sent to PSA for grading. And I am going to do a follow-up video to this one, either the next day or, sometime this week, where we're going to compare some of the cards from the Sword and Shield era in their overall grading volume versus some of the cards in the Scarlet and Violet era, because I just think it's a great opportunity for us to ground itself. More grading isn't bad. It isn't good. Remember, the only thing that drives the price of Pokemon cards is you and me and the supply and demand. So as long, hey, listen, there can be 100,000 PSA 10s of this Charizard card out there. If we're still really, really hot and heavy over it, if everybody out there in the world wants one, price is going to continue to go up. But just keep that in mind as we go throughout the course of this video, because I think these are some really interesting takeaways. Now, the next thing that we talk about here are the most graded sets. And unsurprisingly, you will see here that 3 of these quote-unquote sets are actually promos from different ages. So you see the Japanese 2025 promo is up there. Then you have the Japanese 2025 Scarlet and Violet promo, right? So you see that featured up here. But one of the interesting things is too, if you look at all of these different quote unquote sets that are on here, there's really only one Japanese set that's on here, which is Terastal Festival. And as far as I'm concerned, what that does is it lets us know that, listen, a lot of the market right now in terms of the grading volume is really focused on these Japanese promos, which have an incredibly high gem rate. We know that the printing quality in Japan is absolutely through the roof. So whenever you see these really high grading numbers, the PSA 10 population is going to be really, really high for them as well. Next thing that I wanted to talk about here is look at some of these sets that are still on the most graded set list. English 151 and Sword and Shield Crown Zenith. Like, how wild is this? These sets are from 2023. Crown Zenith is from January of 2023, right? The age in these sets, both of these are well over 2 years old. Crown Zenith is knocking at the door of being 3 years old. And yet, despite that, we still see them featured on this most graded sets list month after month. It is absolutely incredible. Over 500,000 Crown Zenith cards have been graded. Over 625,000 English 151 cards have been graded. And it just goes to show you that even though these sets have some age behind them, the cards are so awesome. The sets are so deep. That is something very important to understand, is the depth of a set will obviously have a large impact on how many cards from that set is being graded. 151, obviously, of the original 151 Pokemon. Every single Pokemon featured in that is an absolute stunner. Lots of illustration rares, special illustration rares. Just a very, very special set. And Crown Zenith was just full of hits. Crown Zenith was a ton of fun to open. Gorgeous cards all over the place. Now, the other thing that I thought was pretty interesting to talk about here is take a look at Celebrations. So Celebrations was a set from the Sword and Shield era. It was our most recent anniversary set. To be honest with you, it was printed into the ground. Not a lot of people enjoyed the set. The artwork wasn't very intriguing, right? It was just reprints of old cards with the little Pikachu stamp on there with the 25 for the eyes, all that good stuff. It was not a very valuable set for a very long time. Now we're starting to see the singles cards pop, right? Now we're starting to see the sealed product pop. And it's because obviously 2026 is going to bring us the 30th anniversary. So in the hindsight here, it's very, very awesome to watch these trends happen when we have these big things on the horizon in the future, because you and me, we can remember these, and when we start to see these patterns emerge, we can take advantage of them. We see that a lot of times when a new set is coming out with new mechanics, right? The Mega Series has been the biggest catalyst to the XY era popping off in terms of single cards pricing, because the Mega Series brought back Mega Evolution Pokemon, and the XY era was the launch of that. So we just kind of see how new can really drive prices in old. So I thought that was a really, really cool thing to call out. The other thing that I thought was interesting too is, listen, Japanese 151 is off the list. I wasn't quite sure when that was going to happen, but it is officially dropped off. That is a wildly popular set, just like the English one is. But it's interesting to see English coming in at number 3, and then the Japanese version dropping completely off. And then, listen, Prismatic Evolutions drops down to number 8. I still think that's a stunner of a set, but interesting to see it drop down to 8. Now, what I have here is I put 2 black boxes on this, because for me, I like to highlight what my big takeaways are. And these are the black boxes that represent the sets that I think we need to pay attention to, because obviously there's the highest degree of collector interest in it right now. You got Destined Rivals, you got Pokemon 151, you got Terastal Festival. We already talked about Crown Zenith, right? You got Prismatic Evolutions, and then you got the Celebrations Classic Collection, you know, back to the last anniversary set. So when you think about what's going on here in the macro level of the hobby, where people are paying their most attention to, obviously grading volume follows demand and interest, and you can see that these are the sets that are some of the hottest ones out there right now. Next thing that we're talking about, this is the exact slide that I used last month because it's just fascinating to look at this. So last month we looked at TCG cards graded at PSA by month, and we said, okay, listen, you know, over the last month we saw grading volume drop. You see those two red arrows coming down. However, we said, listen, that is historical. That was what we've seen over the last couple years, so no big deal. We're probably going to see grading volume pop off. What I did not expect to see, and has absolutely blown my mind, and is what is giving me a little bit of a pause, is take a look at that blue bar on the far right. That is the TCG grading volume at PSA for last month, and there was over 1.226 million TCG cards graded at PSA last month. And it's really hard for me to kind of formulate the words to just say how big that is. It is just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, you know, when you look at how the trends have been since January of 2022, you see the blue bars and they kind of wave their way up. You know what I mean? We don't see any big jumps. You know, really 2025, we saw a little bit of a step function change in terms of volume. And yeah, it went up, you know, about 200,000 in terms of TCG grading over the course of a month, but then it kind of held it. Then we saw a little bit of a jump again. You know, we started to hit 1 million or just shy of 1 million for the first time, and now it jumps all the way to 1.2 million. It is just absolutely out of this world, out of my mind. I don't even know what to say about it, but it does give me, I wouldn't say a little bit of pause or concern, but it does make me just think in the back of my mind, kind of like what I started off with when I talked about, you know, the value of sealed and the opportunity for sealed to outperform pretty much everything else out there. You know, when I see this types of grading volume, even though I love PSA slabs, I have tons of them. I love sending cards off to PSA. Me and my family do it all the time. We get great joy from it. From a long-term investment standpoint, it's going to be very interesting to see how cards from this era in particular kind of, I don't know how they perform over the next 3 or 4 years, knowing that the grading volume has what it's been throughout the course of 2025. Now, this is again the exact slide that we used from last month, and we use this to frame up the overall grading volume because this just goes to show you how wild it is in terms of the impact that TCG grading is having at PSA and really in the overall card market. So this was last month, this was September, there was 1.55 million items, total items graded at PSA. That includes everything you can think of, and 844,000 of that were TCG cards. Now the big call out was that was just shy of 55% of the total grading volume at PSA was TCG cards. And in the 6 previous months, we had seen that number be north of 60%. So TCG cards have been absolutely dominating grading volume at PSA. Now, what did we see this month? As you would imagine, almost 2 million items were graded at PSA last month. That is a 1.97 million total cards graded at PSA last month is absolutely wild. But the big call out to me is if you look at the bottom, again, total TCG and non-sports. So remember, this includes non-sports. So there's a little bit of that in there, not just TCG stuff, but it's not big enough to change the overall numbers here. So 1.27 million of that 1.97 million was TCG and non-sports. And I underlined it in black. Look at the month-over-month change, up 51% month-over-month. And the TCG and non-sports segment in PSA for the month of October was up 126% year-over-year. The total volume at PSA, almost 65% of it came from TCG and non-sports. It is just absolutely incredible. I continue to use all of these superlatives and these words to describe it, but it's really just hard to conceptualize the fact that the volume at PSA being at almost 2 million total items graded, about 65% of that came from the TCG space that you and I and everybody watching this channel love so much. It's absolutely wild to think about. Now, the next thing that we talk about, and this is my homegrown graph, right? If you've been following this channel, you know that I was into sports cards for a very, very, very long time. Like 22 years, I was doing sports cards. I was big into the NFL Hall of Fame rookie cards graded by PSA. Like that is a big chunk of my, you know, I call it paper net worth. I'm never going to sell them, but I've been doing it for 23 years, so it's a lot of money in there. But I felt when my kids got into Pokemon and I started to learn about it, I'm like, man, I think the Pokemon TCG space is going to overtake ball sports for a variety of reasons. So I started tracking the total number of what I call ball sports cards graded at PSA, which is the combination of baseball, basketball, and football, versus the TCG space at PSA month over month. So you can see the blue line represents the total TCG volume at PSA, and the orange line represents the, again, quote unquote, ball sports, baseball, basketball, and football volume. And you can see that over time, they've kind of been battling back and forth. It's been like a heavyweight fight. And then, you know, we had them going neck and neck. And then throughout the course of 2024, we kind of saw ball sports start to pull away. Look at that blue line in 2025. And most amazingly, look at what happened last month. Like, Pokemon has just separated itself by so much in terms of the overall grading volume versus ball sports. And again, I am very bullish on this in the long run. I don't want that to be lost on anybody, but it does give me a little bit of a pause. I mean, look at that. 62% of all of the cards graded last month came from TCG, and you can see non-sports down there was 3%. So you add the 62 from TCG, you add the 3% from non-sports, and that gets you to the 65 number that we saw on the previous slide. But 62% of all of the grading volume was specifically from the TCG area, which is just absolutely insane. Is it sustainable? We're only going to find out with time. Like, nobody has a crystal ball, nobody knows what's going to happen, but TCG has certainly separated itself by a step function from ball sports. And for me, it's just something to keep an eye on. It doesn't scare me away. It doesn't get me excited. It's just something that I'm going to keep a finger on the pulse of, and I'll continue to bring you updates as we go through this very, very interesting period. Now, the next thing that we're talking about is the most graded subjects. Not a whole lot going on here. You know, Pikachu has taken over the crown. It seems like, I don't know, for almost a year now, it's been wild. Charizard, for the first 2 years that we did this, Charizard was always number one. Pikachu, ever since 2025 rolled around, Pikachu has come in at number one. So very interesting to see Pikachu take over versus Charizard. Really not a lot of change here. You saw Mewtwo and Mew. We know there's a lot of interest in those two characters right now. They've actually overtaken Umbreon. Umbreon has now dropped down. Those two have jumped back up. Blastoise was on this last month. Blastoise came off. Ray came on. Now keep an eye on Rayquaza. I promise you, if there is a Mega Series set that's going to feature Ray, there will be a huge increase in grading volume. You can mark my word. We've been doing this for over 3 years. You can set your watch to it. So if we get the early indication that it's going to happen, I've done a lot of videos on my favorite Rayquaza cards that I think have the opportunity to outperform if we get a Mega Series set with it. But keep an eye on that, because there could be some very serious change there. And then, you know, whenever I'm doing my videos and I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey, listen, these are the big name Pokemon that I want to make sure I have exposure to, a lot of times it comes through this list, right? You got Eevee, you got Gengar, you got Zapdos, you got Reshiram on there, you got Sylveon, Venusaur. I mean, these are obviously the biggest names in the hobby. So whenever I'm thinking about investing in cards for the long term, these are some of the names that I'm looking for. Final slide, and this is it, is just to talk about overall what's happening at PSA. And I did not change the verbiage. This is the exact verbiage from last month, but I did change the slide to represent the volume. And look at how high that black line is compared to all of the other green bars. It is just, again, it's incredible, the grading volume that they have done. Now, if you keep your finger on the pulse of PSA, they're opening new grading centers all over the place. They've opened another one in Canada. They're opening one in Europe. They opened another one in Florida, on top of the one they have in New Jersey, on top of the one they have in California, on top of the one they have in Japan. Listen, I'm going to say this again in future videos, but there's a graveyard full of businesses that had made long-term bets based on short-term trends. And you should always remember that if you're a small business owner, which me and my wife have been for the last couple of years, like, it is a very, very poor decision to make long-term bets based on short-term trends. And I'm not saying that the overall Pokemon market isn't going to be very, very strong for a very long time, but we just need to understand that I am guessing that this 1.223 million cards we saw graded in September probably won't hold over the next 18 months. I think we're going to see some of the grading volume slow down. I think we're going to see a lot more product flushed into the market. I think we're going to see things cool off just a little bit. All of that is good. All of that is healthy. And for me, all of that is exciting, because I hope you and I and everybody else out there will have opportunity to get some amazing products with great long-term opportunities at some really affordable prices that just aren't in the cards today. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's super data heavy, but really, really important stuff. If you made it to the end, you enjoyed the content, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I will talk to you later. Thanks, everybody. Bye.